Everybody is talking about AI. It seems as though most people are excited about AI and what the future may look like because of it. But what is alarming is that our fascination with the artificial over the natural is about to reach fever pitch. And as a result, most people are either ignorant of the potential dangers of AI, or they are unaware of how AI is being implemented in their lives without even knowing it and the negative consequences of that process. Some may say that our concerns about AI are an overreaction, and others believe these concerns are justified. Nevertheless, AI is increasingly infiltrating our lives, and it is not going unnoticed by those with their ears and eyes open. Though what is concerning is that experts in the AI field are airing those concerns, which brings me to AI 2027. A detailed scenario showing how we might get from our current AI systems to superintelligence in coming years. AI 2027 proposes two potential scenarios, and yes, one of those ends with AI killing each and every one of us. The researchers of AI 2027 are convinced that either scenario is likely if we don't pivot and curtail our advancements in AI, creating safer systems aligned with human needs and values. But even though this sounds terrible, none of it is a surprise from the Hindu world age doctrine of the Yugas. The Yugas actually predicted that this would happen, which presents us with a choice. You can either remain asleep at the wheel of your own life and remain a puppet to AI and the companies who own such systems, or you can take responsibility for your life and listen to the knowledge that I'm about to explain, so that you can make an informed choice to either further the existence of humanity or sleepwalk into the arms of AI superintelligence and the extinction of the human species. So let me explain how AI 2027 and the Hindu time system of the Yugas are intimately connected, and also a way out of this mess that tech companies and technologists are creating for humanity. So what is AI 2027, and how did the researchers arrive at these two potential scenarios that they see playing out as we go further into AGI and superintelligence? Well, before we go deep into that, I want to read a statement that you find at the top of their website. We predict that the impact of superhuman AI over the next decade will be enormous, exceeding that of the Industrial Revolution. We wrote a scenario that represents our best guess about what that might look like. It's informed by trend extrapolations, war games, expert feedback, experience at OpenAI, and previous forecasting successes. So as you see with that statement at the top of the website, they're predicting the future of AI to be more transformative than the Industrial Revolution. And also they explain that they have significant experience within this field of research. So some of the brains behind AI 2027 are part of the non-profit research organization AI Futures Project that aims to forecast the future of AI, which is founded by Daniel Coccatello. Now, all of the researchers involved in AI 2027 and the AI Futures Project are interesting in and of themselves and have significant experience in the AI field. But particularly, Daniel Coccatello presents a interesting case in relation to the AI 2027 scenarios. Before starting the AI Futures Project, Daniel worked at OpenAI, and when he resigned from OpenAI in 2024, he refused to sign a non-disparagement agreement, which meant giving up millions of dollars in equity so that he could speak openly about his AI safety concerns. That should be alarming in and of itself, right? He worked for OpenAI and did not sign the non-disparagement agreement, leaving millions on the table. Now, what does Daniel know? That's the question, right? And that's why this detailed document is very important for many to read if you want to get more knowledge on AI and giving more plausibility to AI 2027 and the experience of Daniel Cockatello in the field of AI. We just have to go back to over a year before ChatGPT was released, because Daniel predicted the rise of chatbots, $100 training runs, sweeping AI chip export controls, and chain of thought reasoning. Daniel is known to be very early and often right about what's happening next in AI. And a lot of this is detailed in his What 2026 Looks Like, which was an AI scenario forecast for 2022 to 2026 that held up pretty well considering the advancements in AI that we've seen in the last few years. So essentially, AI 2027 is a forecast scenario by these researchers that predicts a rapid acceleration in AI development, leading to potentially having artificial general intelligence by the end of 2027 onto superintelligence by 2030, when we see a complete AI takeover. Now you're probably asking, what is AGI? What is artificial general intelligence? Well, one of the three godfathers of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, explains AI that is at least as good as humans at nearly all of the cognitive things that humans do. So this moment of AGI presents the splintering of both scenarios, right? Of both scenarios. And so that is when the artificial system becomes like us, or if not better than us, on its way to superintelligence. And so AI 2027 presents those two scenarios. But I don't want to bore you with every fine detail of AI 2027. It's obviously better for you to read it yourself, because it's so comprehensive. It would take more than one video to cover, because it covers everything from geopolitics to the economy. And so there's a lot to go into when you look at this document. And so it's better for you to read it yourself if you want to get into those fine details. But we're speaking here mainly about what these two scenarios present to humanity and how it's related to the Hindu time system of the Yugas. And so, as I said, what is important is the two paths that we can traverse once we reach this point of artificial general intelligence. So what are these two end scenarios? Well, the first one is a race ending. This is an arms race to reach super intelligence, where AI actually becomes misaligned with human interests and leads to human extinction by 2030 due to a complete AI takeover. Now, that doesn't sound very good, right? That does not sound very good. And it's kind of ironic when you look at that scenario. Greed gets the better of humans at the end of the day, right? You've got all of these countries and companies competing with each other to get to this point of AGI onto superintelligence. So human greed is inexhaustible, a lot of people will say, right? Human greed is inexhaustible. And it is proven by this first race scenario. So you're probably wondering what that second scenario is by now. And so the second ending is the slow down ending. This is where we survive, thankfully. We essentially got lucky, but only somewhat lucky considering we end up with some sort of oligarchy, but at least we're still alive, right? So in this second ending, the AI systems are aligned with human interests over and above its own interests. It's aligned with human interests. Now, it is believed in this second ending, according to the researchers, that somehow life will be better, even though we'll be governed by some sort of technological oligarchy. But life will be better in some way. And they address this towards the ending of AI 2027, where they explain, that robots will become commonplace, and they jokingly explain that Peter Thiel finally gets his flying car. But they even go into more detail about what life will be like, say, after 2030. So they explain that after 2030, that even in developing countries, poverty becomes a thing of the past, thanks to universal basic income, UBI, and foreign aid. And apparently we are headed for the stars, no matter whether you wanted this or not, but we are heading for the stars nevertheless. And so looking at both endings, that brings to mind two questions that I want to ask you. First, what do these tech companies and technologists get to decide how our lives will be in the future? And secondly, why do most people follow these tech companies and technologists like sheep? For me, those two questions are very confusing when I look at humanity and I look at people's fascination with technology and how people just follow along because something is created for them. There becomes this worldwide hypnosis in regards to technology. You don't see many people doing other different things unless you go to North Sentinel Island. But if you're not at North Sentinel Island, then most people are doing the same thing. That's right. So now that we've had a brief overview of AI 2027, how does the Hindu time system of the Yugas relate to AI 2027? So what are the Yugas? Now, a lot of people don't know what the Yugas are, and some have a warped version of the Yugas. But the Yugas is the time system that we find in Hinduism, and there actually are two systems. There's a short count system, which is related to the Guru Sri Yukteswar. It came from a revelation that Sri Yukteswar had, and it's more of a short count system, and that's something on its own, right? What we're speaking about here is the older traditional Yuga system. And this is an ancient system, and it goes back to the Vishnu Purana and the Bhagavata Purana, two ancient Hindu scriptures. This is where we find the specifics of the Hindu Yugas. And amazingly, when we look at this time system and we observe our own world, a lot of it seems true when we look at these ancient scriptures and we study the Yugas. But you got to remember, this time system is not a linear system in the way that people normally think of time. It's cyclical. It's a natural system, but we're talking about a universal system, right? It's a universal system not based on humans, but based on the life of the universe. We are a part of the universe, but it's based on the life of the universe, not the life of human beings. So it's a universal cyclical system, and this is why it's such a vast system. Now, the Yugas are based on a day and night of Brahma. Brahma being the creative principle or god of the Trimurti. So you have Brahma as the creator, you have Vishnu, the preserver or the sustainer, and then you have Shiva, the destroyer or the deconstructor of reality. So here we are talking about a day and night of Brahma. So the universe comes into being. Brahma opens his eyes and brings the universe into being. Sometimes they call this the breath of Brahma. And so the universe comes into being. A lot of people will relate this to the Big Bang, right? And so a day and night of Brahma are literally not a day and night as we think of them, right? It's actually a vast duration of time. So one day of Brahma is 4.32 billion years. So a day and night of Brahma is 8.64 billion years. And so that is the whole duration of a universe's life, is the 8.64 billion years, right? Some people actually relate the 4.32 billion years to the life of Earth. And when we look at how old the Earth is, a lot of the age of the Earth in relation to the Yugas is not far off, but that's just speculation, right? But the Yugas are related to this vast duration of time. And so, like I said, it's not a night and day that we experience, it's a night and day according to the universe. And now within these kalpas are the Yugas, right? Are the cycles we find within those two kalpas. And the Yugas are made up of 4 cycles of time. And these 4 Yugas are actually what we would call a Maha Yuga, right? A great Yuga. And so the Yugas are Satya Yuga, which we could say is the golden age, and this is the ideal or truthful age, spanning 1,728,000 years. And then there is Treta Yuga, the age where virtue is declined by a quarter, spanning 1,296,000 years. And then after that, we have Dwapara Yuga, the age where virtue is declined by half, spanning 864,000 years. And last, and we could say the least, is Kali Yuga, where virtue is reduced to a quarter, spanning 432,000 years. Now, can you guess what Yuga we are in? Are we in Satya Yuga, the golden age, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, or the dark age of Kali Yuga? Now, a lot of people believe that we're in the Satya Yuga. Maybe people who love AI and technology and transhumanism and all of these sorts of things, maybe they think we're in the golden age. But when we look at Satya Yuga is very simple, right? Satya Yuga is not materially focused. You don't have a lot of things in the Satya Yuga according to the Yugas doctrine, right? Life is simple and we are content and not anxious for progress. Think about that. Are we content and do we care about progress? And tick, yes, we're anxious. Tick, yes, we are anxious for progress, which is like throwing a snake in the grass, right? Which is actually undoing humanity, which we're going to get to in a second. And in the Satya Yuga, everyone is Brahman centered, so the ultimate reality of Brahman. And you could relate this to God. We are God centered and we are dedicated to our Dharma, right? Our path in this life, our spiritual path in this life. And so that's the essence of the Satya Yuga. And so, no, we are not in the Satya Yuga. We are in the Kali Yuga. Now, the Kali Yuga began in 3102 BCE when Krishna departed the world, or in some sense, God departed the world, right? Left the world. Some people believe Krishna died and left the world, or just departed to the heavenly abode of Vaikuntha, which we find in Vaishnavism, so in the worship of Vishnu, where Vishnu is the representation of Brahman, the ultimate reality. And this is actually depicted in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is imploring Arjuna to fight his cousins in the Great War of Kurukshetra. So in this Great War of Kurukshetra, Krishna departs the world, and this signifies, according to Vyasa, the great sage Vyasa, the beginning of the Kali Yuga. And this was in the time of 3102 BC. And so if we have to take that serious, we are in the Kali Yuga, and it goes for 432,000 years. So we're in for a long ride, right? And so that's where we are in the spectrum of time according to the Yugas. Now that we have a good framework of what the Yugas actually are, what is the characteristic of the Kali Yuga? Because each Yuga has a particular characteristic. Remember I said Satya Yuga is very simple, right? People aren't anxious for progress. We don't need things. People are God-centered. So what would be the opposite in the dark age of the Kali Yuga? It would be the devolution of mind into matter, right? A focus on materialism and a turning away from God, a turning away from Brahman, right? And so there's a focus just on the material world and what we can do with it, a lack of contentment. And we have this constant anxiety for progress, which we see with technology, right? And people seem to be never content with what they have. And even technologists and tech companies are never content. They're never content. They want to just keep advancing and advancing and advancing and advancing until we just fall off a cliff, right? And so the characteristic is the devolution of mind into matter. And so materialism then becomes the heart of the Kali Yuga. And we can see this all around us, right? Look at consumeristic thinking in the world, right? People's obsession with consumerism, people's obsession with buying the next thing or buying what is new, never being content with already what they have and seeking more, right? And so this obsession is part of the devolution of mind into matter, because you become obsessed with the external world and you turn away from the internal world. This devolution of mind into matter is what is driving our obsession with digital technology, AI, even transhumanism, right? This is what's driving that obsession. It's this addiction to the external world and where we can go and what we can do without even knowing this equipment that we have and that we operate through, which seems crazy, right? It seems really crazy that we don't understand this, but we're trying to understand that. And this is where all problems come from. And this is a turning away from what is natural to what is artificial. And so because we're attracted to the artificial, we're obsessed with integrating our mind with technology. And that's already begun to a certain extent when you think about it, right? Because people are integrating their mind and their lives into social media, into everything online, and they think that the online world is a world, but it's only in the world, right? And so they've already begun this process of integrating their mind into it, which then makes them sympathetic to AI and transhumanism and all of these other silly advents that technology and tech companies are telling the world that is good for us, right? But they are not. right? And so this devolution of mind into matter is the characteristic of the Kali Yuga. There can be no question about that. And this also lends into part of that mentality that the material universe is all that there is, right? Because in the Kali Yuga, we lose our spiritual orientation and inclination, and we focus more on the material world. And so that enhances our fear of death. And so then we start thinking about physical immortality, right? This is where ideas of transhumanism come about. This is where, people want to live on in AI, and, they want their mind scanned so that they can live on in the future somehow in some form. And this is an insane way of thinking about the world. Think about it, right? Think about it. You think that that's all there is, the material world, when you have all of this within yourself that is miraculous, that is operating. We can actually create things like AI. We can create a computer and a smartphone and a car and so forth and so on, which is completely miraculous when you think about it, right? But that came from inside. But we don't explore what's in here. We're only exploring what's out here because we think that there is only the material world. So that, again, this enhances our fear of death, right? And our obsession with immortality, when death actually is an important part of life. And so that process is a spiritual process in the grand scheme of things within the world, right? Everything must come and go. That's how things operate. But we're trying to create a type of immortality through technology. And a lot of people actually believe that is good, if you can believe it. And so this obsession with technology and the external world, it's not only something that the tech companies and the technologists are hypnotized by. When I look around at the world, it seems as though most of the world is hypnotized by this process as well. And so this is moving us down a path that is going to be hard to turn around and go in a different direction, right? Every action and habit we gain from technology is taking us down this wrong path, right? And I explain this briefly in my book, Spiritual Freedom in the Digital Age, where I state, our attraction to technology is only getting stronger, which is evident with the digital world, AI, and transhumanism. Our mind is turned outward to the point that we would rather be a machine than nature. This materialist thinking is one of the greatest threats to the human race. Where our attention is placed will determine our future. So before you play unconsciously with your phone, ask yourself how that habit is training your mind. Be brutally honest with yourself. Ask yourself, how many times do you unconsciously reach for your phone every day? Though you may feel this is insignificant in the grand scheme of life, it's all leading to a collective movement away from nature and our own innate nature and connection with the universe. And so this movement from the natural to the artificial is a process that's been going on pretty much since the Industrial Revolution, right? But it's been ramped up since the advent of computers and the internet and so forth and so on, particularly since the smartphone and now with AI, right? And so you've got this speeding up of this process of going from the natural to the artificial. And this is all due to this anxiety we have for progress, which is what Aldous Huxley called the apocalyptic religion of inevitable progress. Why can't we be content with what we already have? Seriously, why can't we be content? What is wrong with human beings? Now, this is where the apocalyptic religion of inevitable progress comes in. Now, to explain what Aldous Huxley is talking about here, I'll turn to my book, The Tradition of Natural Taoism, where I'll read a brief passage from myself and a quote from Huxley about the apocalyptic religion of inevitable progress. Everything non-human is made to fit human society and its standards and values until, eventually, anything non-human becomes extinct. Prolific writer and philosopher Aldous Huxley elaborates on this human-centric view in relation to the story of Hundun. In this delicately comic parable, chaos is nature in the state of wu-wei, non-assertion or equilibrium. Shu and Hu are the living images of those busy persons who thought they would improve on nature by turning dry prairies into wheat fields and produce deserts, who proudly proclaimed the conquest of the air and then discovered that they had defeated civilization, who chopped down vast forests to provide the newsprint demanded by the universal literacy, which was to make the world safe for intelligence and democracy, and got wholesale erosion, pulp magazines, and the organs of fascist, communist, capitalist, and nationalist propaganda. In brief, Shu and Hu are devotees of the apocalyptic religion of inevitable progress, and their creed is that the kingdom of heaven is outside you and in the future. Chuang-Tzu, on the other hand, like all good Taoists, has no desire to bully nature into subserving ill-considered temporal ends, at variance with the final end of men as formulated in the perennial philosophy. His wish is to work with nature so as to produce material and social conditions in which individuals may realize Tao on every level, from the psychological up to the spiritual. We are all slowly being brainwashed by the apocalyptic religion of inevitable progress, as Huxley put it. All governments and nations are clamoring over each other in this game. Most human beings are completely severed from everything else in this world. They have no real relationship with nature other than how it can serve us and appease our material needs. The apocalyptic religion of inevitable progress is again a moving away from what is natural to what is artificial, and this obsession with progress, this anxiety for progress, which people constantly are searching for, not just collectively, but also in their individual lives. We are never content, right? But when is enough enough? Have you ever thought about that? Just for yourself on a personal level. And nothing represents this more than technology and our obsession with phones, TVs, AI, social media, and so forth and so on. There's this obsession with progress. And this is what AI basically represents. It has become an element of the apocalyptic religion of inevitable progress. And so we're going down this path into artificiality and a movement away from what is natural. And I always personally found this strange, right? Because I don't have that good a relationship with technology, because I've always tried to stay real and keep my human relationships authentic and clean without having a phone interfere with communicating with someone. And I was never interested in mobile phones or smartphone in general, right? Just to give you a little bit of a backstory, my first mobile phone was when I was around 21 or 22, and I completely hated it. I lived in a home with 3 of my good friends. We were all apprentices at the time. We had no money, right? That's why we all lived in a small house together. And we were all perfectly fine with the landline phone. My mum would ring me, every couple of weeks just to say, how you doing, and this and that. We didn't need to WhatsApp with each other every day and so forth and so on. People actually back then had space in their mind, and you didn't have to live in someone's back pocket all day and every day, right? Anyway, a salesman from this mobile network called Orange, which is now actually defunct, but this guy came around and he sold us all on having a mobile phone each, right? And it was one of those little flip doozies, button and everything like that, because this would solve the so-called problem of working out the phone bill at the end of the month, right? So we'd all have our own personal phone bill. So we'd just call home using the mobile and this and that, even though it was really expensive back in that day. And so we got this mobile phone, and I completely hated it from the get-go. I didn't like that anyone could text me at any moment of the day, could ring me at any moment of the day. So I always just left my phone at home. And I went out one day, and I remember one of my friends that I lived with, when I come home, he completely scolded me. He's like, I was trying to ring you, and I could hear your phone ringing on your bed and so forth and so on. I was like, I don't need a phone with me. What do I need a phone with me? Just because there is a phone doesn't mean I'm going to start behaving like that. I am not a sheep. I'm not going to just behave like that because technology companies say this is good for me. And this has always been my stance with technology because, first of all, I'm a human being. I'm not a sheep that just follows the herd, right? And so I said to him, look, I'm just not a sheep. I'm not going to take that with me. And he got pissed off and so forth and so on. But he worked it out over time because I never took that thing with me anywhere, right? I sometimes would take it to work and so forth and so on, but even then it would annoy me because someone would be texting me while I'm digging a hole, right? And so that's my history with mobile phones. And my first smartphone was in the year 2022, if you can believe that. And it has been a complete disaster. I've just left that thing in the drawer I'm done with it, right? So I got that because after COVID, I needed to have evidence of a PCR test. Remember those things? A PCR test just so I could get on a plane. I mean, how ridiculous, right? So I got it for that reason, and now it's just forever in the drawer. But even though that's been my mentality with it, I just can't understand why people are so fascinated with technology. I just don't get it. Like, why people continue to just follow whatever is rolled out by these tech companies or by these social media platforms, and people just follow. I still don't get that. And especially when you consider, like I've seen a lot of these polls where people say that they're not happy with their smartphone, they're not happy with social media, but it's become such a habit that they just can't help themselves. They're always reaching for the phone, they're always checking what's on social media, but they admit openly that they're not happy. Now, that is what is called an addiction, right? And usually, addiction is a negative word when we associate it with alcohol or drugs or sex or porn or this and that, right? It's got a negative connotation, but we don't have a negative connotation when we relate it to our behavioral addiction we have with smartphone and social media. It's an addiction. It is negative. If you are unhappy with your smartphone and social media, time to throw it away, time to get off those platforms. There is no question about it. It's an addiction and you need to get off it. And so this progress, right, with the phone and with social media and now AI, apparently makes people happy, right? All of these advents of technology are supposed to help us, right? It's supposed to make life better, but it's making people more miserable, more divided. And it's not doing much for most people in general. Obviously, it helps certain people, and we can converse here. There are positive things, but it's not a net positive, it's a net negative, right? That's what we need to remember. And it's destroying lives, it's destroying the psychology, particularly of young people, because young people actually think that they can behave the way they do online. And they think that's very natural, the way they behave online, right? Just writing comments to strangers they don't even know. And they think that that's perfectly fine. But imagine if you walk down the street and you just start yelling at someone across the road you don't even know. I mean, what will happen, right? And this is where young people are starting to struggle in the real world, right? Because the online world is not real, and the way that you behave on there is not correct behavior. And so I often tell people the way you behave in the real world, you should behave online. If you're writing to a stranger just because you disagree with them and you don't really know them and you start an argument or this and that, that's cowardice. That's what that is. Flat out cowardice. Because you wouldn't do that in real life. You would hide behind your computer screen and you do it, but you would not do that in real life. So that's where people have got to start to think. You got to start to operate online how you operate offline. And that is what is natural, right? To function in one way across the board, not just because you're online, say, oh, now I can be like this, right? I can hide, I can be anonymous, I can say this and that, I can get triggered and so forth and so on. There's a lot of this weakness that is inculcated within people, right? This fundamental weakness where you can't even hear things that you disagree with without getting triggered and typing. And, it's just complete childish, right? It's undisciplined, childish behavior where you should be able to listen and hear different viewpoints. It's like the old days. Like when I used to read a paper before going to school, I wouldn't sit there, read the paper and just throw the paper in the air, pissed off, saying something to mum and this and that. It's complete nuts. I just put the paper down, whatever, just go to school and off you go. And so getting back to my point, if all of this technology hasn't made us happy, how will AI apparently make us happy? We have to ask ourselves, what is really wrong with human beings? What is wrong with us? Because AI, in a sense, proves something about human beings. It proves that we are self-destructive. And we always throw a snake in the grass when we have life good. Because we're not content, right? We don't realize that we've got life good. We are then obsessed with things like AI, and this becomes naturally self-destructive. And this self-destructive tendency we find everywhere in the world, right? And this is obviously due to our lack of contentment, which great sages like Lao Tzu and Taoism would talk about a lot, about knowing the contentment of contentment, right? Because he would look around in a Confucian society and see that there was this lack of contentment and this obsession with inevitable progress, right, within that society, which we still have now, even thousands of years later. And so there's this self-destructive tendency that we have. We see this in relationships, right? A couple may have a perfect relationship and it's perfect, but one of those two either the man or the woman will step out on the other and have an affair with someone. They have a perfectly great relationship, but the temptation was too much, right? And so that's what a self-destructive tendency is. And it's almost part of our psychology, unfortunately, if we are unaware of it. If you're conscious of it, you won't act on that self-destructive tendency. But this is one of the things that is fundamentally wrong with humans, this self-destructive tendency. We've got life good, but we're just going to throw a snake in the grass. We want AI. We want to go down this path of AI. We want to go towards superintelligence. Because we don't want to think anymore. We want a robot to think for us. We don't want to lift a finger anymore. We want a robot to do something for us, do the dishes or tend to the garden or write a book or so forth and so on. Why would we do that? It's completely bonkers. And so AI, again, as I said, proves that we are self-destructive. And a lot of us have this tendency because we just don't want to think for ourselves. And we just want to go along with the herd. We don't want to look at AI and go, hey, I'm not going to do that, sorry. Or we're not going to speak up towards the tech companies and technologists and say, look, we don't actually need that because life is good. I can actually lift my own hand and do things on my own. I can think for myself, right? But people just go along with the herd, unfortunately. And this is an evolutionary trait that doesn't serve humanity anymore, right? This going along with the herd, this human sheep psychology. And unfortunately, people see AI and they think it's great and everyone just lines up and goes down that path straight off the cliff, and then we don't need humans anymore, right? And then people will start to complain when they get to the end of the road and so forth and so on, and other people saying, I told you so. I remember back in 2010 when I said to my friend, hey, you're going to in the future see people just sitting on their phone all day long and this and that and just looking at things. And he was like, you're crazy, man. You always talk that sort of stuff. Because I was writing articles at the time about where technology is taking us, specifically where the phone was taking us. And that was the early development of the smartphone, right? The apps and that had not even been introduced. And I was talking about at that time how people are going to start staring at their phones because of internet and this and that, right? I didn't know that the apps and all that were going to be on it, but that is the internet too, right? And so I was stating all that, and my friend's like, that's not going to happen. And then I see him 15 years later on the slot machine. What can you say? What can you say? This is human sheep psychology, and it's something that we all need to be aware of. Why do we follow what is told? Like I said, that question earlier, right? Why do they get to decide that this is good for us? And why do you accept it? Why do you accept it? That's the important thing, right? It's like throughout COVID, right? Throughout COVID, everyone lined up and did what they were told and did not question nor do their own research or, heaven forbid, think for themselves, right? They just followed blindly what they heard on the news, which has an agenda, mind you, and are getting paid by certain companies, mind you, but everyone followed the herd and didn't think for themselves. And so that's something we need to think about, particularly if you've succumbed to that human sheep psychology. You have to be aware of that, right? Because where are we headed with all this technology? What is it doing to our community? Is it bringing us together? Are we harmonious, or is it driving us apart? We both know the answer to that. So this human sheep psychology, you need to remember, is an evolutionary trait, right, that we had for a long period of our evolution, but it doesn't serve us anymore. We don't have to congregate in groups and try to bring down a buffalo and so forth and so on, right? We don't need that anymore. And this evolutionary trait is turned on us by those who seek to control us. That's what you need to remember. And that's what has happened in certain events in the past, right? And that is what's happening now with AI. That evolutionary trait is being turned on us and telling us that all of these good things are going to happen because of AI and this and that, where you outsource your mind, where you start to not think for yourself, and you'll be completely controlled. Completely controlled. But I'm here to share the good news with you. We aren't truly that unintelligent. We aren't. We aren't truly that unintelligent. But we give our power, and we, in this sense, we're giving our mind away to something else that will control us, right? And this is a slippery slope into the devolution of the species. Because we aren't aware of what is wrong with us and where AI is taking us, AI is killing the human spirit ever so slowly, and people aren't aware of it, right? AI is destroying art. You see all of this art with AI and this and that. It's not real art. It's created by AI. Real art is created by humans, right? We're seeing AI grammar checkers, which again makes you dumber because you don't learn how to use grammar properly by using your brain and thinking about it. You just give it to a robot to sort it out for yourself. And essentially, as I've mentioned earlier, we are just outsourcing our mind, making us a more stupefied species, right? As we continue to outsource our mind, we're going to continue to be dumber and dumber and dumber. There is no doubt about it. You can't just look at AI and get fact-based information and think you know a thing, right? That's like saying that you're going to study a philosophy on Wikipedia. You can't study a philosophy on Wikipedia. You've actually got to go and read all the books. So that'll create context in your mind. You'll then have nuanced thinking and understanding of what that subject actually is. Wikipedia gives you fact-based information and bite sizes, right? Just like AI. Hey, what is Advaita Vedanta? It is this. But how can you know what Advaita Vedanta is by just reading a fact-based statement from AI about it? You can't. And so this continual outsourcing of our mind is making us stupid. Think back to the Industrial Revolution, right? A lot of us think about what life was like pre-Industrial Revolution, right? Where we had a lot of skills and there are a lot of skilled workers, and that all just disappeared because of machines, right? That all disappeared. And now we think about it, well, how did they have all those skills? How did they make things with their hands like that? We lost all of it because of machines, right? And a lot of people will say, well, that's good, right? Because we are adherents of the apocalyptic religion of inevitable progress. Why do we want to make anything? Why would we want to use our mind when a machine can do it for us? Crazy thinking. Even when we look at IQ scores dwindling all around the world due to AI and students just going to ChatGPT to find their information, and they don't know how to write cursive anymore, if you can believe it, right? And so we're creating a world where you're not writing down your own ideas and formulating your own opinions on your own. You have assistance by the machine, which actually doesn't help you at all become more intelligent, which is why no surprise that IQ scores all around the world are dwindling. Another thing in relation to this, as I mentioned before, is about art, right? So real art is being destroyed, right? The people don't write their own books anymore. They write an idea or a synopsis to the AI system, and it writes the book for them. It's like having the ultimate ghostwriter, right? Like a lot of those so-called best-selling authors have ghostwriters. They don't actually write the book themselves. Now they're probably just looking for the best AI system, and they might probably write a book a week. Who knows? So real art is being destroyed, right? They don't even know how to use the paintbrush, but they're making a Picasso, right? And this is a great disaster, a great disaster. The human spirit is a beautiful thing. Human creativity is a beautiful thing. You should never give that away, and you should reject that there is even a system that thinks it can do it for you. Even though you may think it's better than what you can do, it's not satisfying and it's meaningless, it's empty, right? It's an empty endeavor. I can tell you what it's like to write an actual book and what it feels like to finish that book, or create a video like I'm creating for you right now. But if an AI bot did that for me, it would be completely meaningless. Completely meaningless. And this says to me that people are more interested in making money than exploring the human spirit. Because why would I explore the human spirit if I can get an AI bot to make a video for me, put it on YouTube, and I can make all this money? Because at the end of the day, from that perspective, money is king. Tragedy. Complete tragedy. Right? And so that type of thinking is what's going to drive us over the cliff. It really is. You need to embrace the human spirit, human creativity, lean into that. Even for myself, I write all of my books by hand first, and then I type them up, right? I do the editing process when I type the book up. I read the book, it's right beside the computer, I type it up. I still write by pen, and I use cursive, which I've heard, unfortunately, cursive is disappearing due to students looking at a screen at school instead of writing on paper. Why are we doing this, right? It doesn't make people smarter. It does not, and it's proven. And even if we look at YouTube these days, right? YouTube is swamped with AI content and the consumers do not know anything about it. As I said, there are just so many AI channels on YouTube that are saturating the platform, taking views and dollars away from human creators, and YouTube, they don't seem to care because they make money regardless. They'll probably just end up making their own channels and it would just be all in-house while the human creators have just been pushed out the door, because why would you want to pay them when you can keep every ad dollar yourself with your own channels that are created by AI? And as I said, YouTube just don't seem to care. And a lot of creators have obviously spoken about this, and YouTube have said that they are trying to remedy this problem, but nothing has happened. But even if you tell people that AI is taking over YouTube channels, human creators are losing money, and it's taking views away from them and so forth and so on, people still have this childish fascination with AI and technology in general, right? It reminds me of a neighbor I had in Tiruvannamalai in the south of India. And I didn't know anything about ChatGPT, right? Knew nothing about it. Didn't even know these AI systems existed because don't have a smartphone. I'm dedicated to the Eastern philosophical and spiritual knowledge and in teaching that, right? This is my life. And so I don't really have a lot of room for a lot of this other stuff, right? It's just stuff, it's fluff, right? Anyway, my neighbor said to me, have you seen ChatGPT? Like, so good and this and that. It can actually write things for you. And he typed, what's Advaita Vedanta? Because we're in Tiruvannamalai. And he was just so obsessed with this technology, right? And he was so fascinated by it and by his phone, right? He was always looking at his phone. And I'm looking over the balcony at the holy mountain of Arunachala, right? And he's sitting there on his phone just next door. And inside, hiding away on his phone, in the comments section, what is going on here, right? How can you be fascinated by AI, be fascinated by ChatGPT, but you're in Tiruvannamalai, the holy mountain of Arunachala is there. You're not fascinated by that? You're not fascinated that it was the home of the great sage Ramana Maharshi? You're not fascinated by Ramana Ashram being there? You can go into Ramana Ashram every morning, which you didn't go to, obviously. And you're not fascinated about learning about Advaita Vedanta? You just type it into ChatGPT and it gives you 2 lines about what Advaita Vedanta is, and you think you know what it is, and you do not? What a great shame. What a great shame. And he's a great young gentleman, but obsessed with technology and not obsessed with the world around him, right? And he actually, he pretended to be a yoga guru / teacher, right? But I observed him every day and he was on his phone, right? He was on his phone while I'm on the balcony reading a book, sipping a chai, looking over Arunachala in awe, right? And so he was completely addicted with this world and where AI is taking us, but not addicted and intoxicated by the spiritual traditions that he pretends to represent. And in saying that, and talking about my neighbor hiding away and this and that, another way that AI kills the human spirit is that it kills community, right? And this began since the smartphone became a thing, right? And this is why I would talk to my friend back in 2010 with my concerns, and especially after the fact when apps and that became a thing on there, and everyone just followed, and it continued to follow, right? And so as a result, communication and community begins to die. There's no real communication, right? You can't be on WhatsApp sending messages all day, think you're in communication. Go and talk to someone face to face. Go sit at a coffee shop, go to a chai shop or something like this. Create real friendships in the real world. There's nothing wrong with sending a message in WhatsApp per se, right? But write a meaningful message. Don't write chit-chat back and forth. It's just meaningless garbage, right? And so community is slowly being destroyed, or if not pretty much destroyed in many places, due to a lack of real communication. Because the more you retreat into your phone, the less you speak to others. And I see couples at restaurants not even talking to each other the whole time, doom scrolling. I mean, how could you actually doom scroll? It's crazy. Like, if I do this, I start to get anxious instantly, right? It's not natural. It's not a natural activity. And most of the content is completely ridiculous. And so we're smarter than that. We're more intelligent than that, but we insult our own intelligence which is unbelievable, right? We insult our own intelligence. And so community is being destroyed as part of this process of AI killing the human spirit, technology killing the human spirit. It's slowly but surely happening, and a lot of people aren't aware of it. I can go to a cafe and there will be not one person talking, if you can believe it. Amazing, really amazing. You couldn't have predicted that 15 years ago. You could barely shut people up 15 years ago. But now you can hear a pin drop. So this is an existential crisis to the point that we are intoxicated by AI and turning our back on our innate naturalness. You are a lab rat which started with the phone and will continue on with the advancements of AI systems. As a result, we just become consumers and we don't care about the human spirit or creativity itself. We just go about our life and become consumers in the online world and get fed what we think is important to us, but becomes detrimental to us because it takes us down a path that we wouldn't have naturally took without those systems in the first place. You need to remember that, right? A lot of what people think in this modern day, they would not have thought without all of this technology in the first place. They would have, let's be honest, a lot of space in their mind rather than what they have within their mind now, which is just a lot of brain rot, right, from social media and internet and obsessions with technology and so forth and so on. And so this is why I believe something like universal basic income will be a complete disaster, because people actually have to do things. You have to be motivated to do something. If you're just getting paid to do nothing, then what are people going to do? If they're already obsessed with technology and AI and this and that, they're just going to sit home and do nothing, achieve nothing, and insult their own intelligence. Like I said, we're much more intelligent than that, and we should not behave like that or be fooled into behaving like that, right? We have to be real about this. This is why, like I said, UBI, Universal Basic Income, I believe will be a complete disaster. It really will be. And I actually don't think that that will solve poverty, so to speak, right? That's an idealistic way of thinking, and that obviously spawns in the mind of idealists. But we know that the world is not idealistic, right? And so obviously if it was going to cure poverty, we'd all be for it. But I don't think that that's going to be the case. It could even make us worse, to be honest. I mean, what would be the weekly wage of universal basic income? It might be nothing, right? And people might go down to the pub and spend it all on the pokie machines. And then they have nothing. You know what you get after that? You get nothing. You get nothing after that wage a week. And so people would begin to lack motivation with universal basic income. And personally, universal basic income will eliminate community. Because think about it. You're getting paid by the oligarchy and you're just sitting at home, like my friend Tiravannamalai, on ChatGPT, on social media, having a laugh in the comment section, trolling someone, a stranger you don't know, again, invoking that cowardice that the online world inculcates in people. And you're doing that, but you're not in the community. You're online. Online is not a real community. They say social media, right? It's not social media. It may have been in its inception when only your friends from school and your family were on there. But now you've just got any random Joe and Jane are your friend, right? And so it completely destroys community. And so UBI will completely destroy community because people will just be at home. They won't be motivated. They will have no purpose in life. Why would you need to do anything, right? And a lot of people say, oh, it would unlock their potential. But what I see around me is there's ample potential, but it's squandered daily because I see a lot of people who have a lot of time and they spend their time on the phone. So you can't tell me if you give them more time that they'll actually do something when they already have ample time and they squander it. So it will essentially eliminate community. It won't breed harmony. And personally, I love seeing people in the community. I love going down to the chai shop. I have a chat with the postman. I have a chat with the garbage man. You know, you're in the community. You're out there. You're talking to people. You have good banter with people. It breeds harmony, right? If you're hiding behind a screen, if you're hiding in your home, in your grandmother's basement, trolling, this doesn't breed community and is bad for your mental health, right? It's better to be outside. Say hello to the postman. Say hello to the checkout people at the supermarket. This is community. This is a beautiful thing, man. Connecting with people. This is the real world. Now, with all of this anxiety about AI and these two potential scenarios in AI 27, are a lot of our concerns unnecessary? Can AI even achieve artificial consciousness, right? We're not just talking about artificial intelligence. Now, this is something that a lot of technologists don't think about. Maybe the tech companies are not too up to speed about how consciousness actually works. It always strikes me as strange when I see a lot of technologists and this and that talk about artificial intelligence, but don't talk about it in the sense of consciousness. Because when we talk about intelligence, it's really consciousness. Intelligence arises in consciousness. It's an aspect of consciousness itself. So AI essentially has a consciousness problem and they don't even know it. And this is probably why a lot of the doom and gloom that we think about AI is probably unfounded when we understand this deeply. Because we need to ask ourselves, can AI truly have pure consciousness like humans, or will it remain on a decision-making and facts level based on its own sense of survival? That's what we need to ask ourselves. Because human beings aren't just based on survival. Our behaviors are based in a lot of sense on that. And still, unfortunately, there's a lot of those evolutionary traits and tendencies that we have, and a lot of our actions are based on that. But we're talking about consciousness itself. That sort of survival, that part of intelligence is arising in consciousness itself. So can artificial intelligence replicate pure consciousness? This is the question, right? And amazingly, a lot of AI experts actually believe consciousness is material, if you can believe it. Even the godfathers of AI believe consciousness is material. It's actually a phenomenon that's in the brain. But we know now that consciousness is not local. This is a localization of the one consciousness. It's doing us, not us doing it, right? And so this is a localization of the one consciousness. This is the equipment, but the consciousness is not local in the brain, right? If it's local in the brain, it's local in the toe. Blood is moving around in your body somehow. You're surviving somehow. You're digesting your food somehow. This is consciousness. I remember Joseph Campbell was once asked, what is consciousness? And he said, the flower turning towards the sun. This is consciousness. It's that higher intelligence. It's not based on just decision-making, morality, and fact-based information, which a lot of people incorrectly assume. Consciousness is not material. We are in part immaterial when we think about it. And when we think about consciousness, consciousness itself is immaterial. Just study your awareness. Your awareness doesn't have a physical conduit. You may say it's here, but the awareness is everywhere. And so we are spiritual essentially, and everything in the universe is spiritual. It is consciousness itself. The universe is consciousness. If we look at the term Brahman from Advaita Vedanta, or Tao from Taoism, or Dhammadhatu from Vajrayana Buddhism, it's about this ultimate substratum that exists in everything, and we are part of it, and we are it as well, but it is doing us. We don't have ultimate dominion over it, right? It has dominion over us. And so that's this ultimate undifferentiated consciousness. Remember, undifferentiated. You need to remember, not differentiated. A differentiated consciousness is us on a local level, Jason on a local level, subjective agency, right? A subjective ego. This is a differentiated consciousness, not undifferentiated. The ultimate pure consciousness is undifferentiated, but we are arising like a wave in that ocean, right? But we are the ocean itself. And so this reminds me of the first law of thermodynamics, right? Where it states, energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred or converted from one form to another. This is consciousness. This energy is eternal. Consciousness is eternal. And so AI experts in the AI field are basing their assumptions on something that is finite. They're basing AI on the material world. The material world is finite. At the end of the night of Brahma, this whole universe disappears. And then a new universe will be born, right? And so they're basing all of their assumptions on the material world, which is finite, right? And they think that they're going to achieve immortality or come into contact with the eternal world. But they're doing that from a materialist, dualistic, finite basis, which is really strange, right? Simply, material is finite, consciousness is eternal. It's what we have to remember. And so can they achieve artificial consciousness? Because you can forget about just intelligence. What they should state is artificial consciousness is what they should talk about. But their perspective, sadly, as I said with consciousness being material, is they reduce consciousness, even they reduce intelligence itself, just to self-awareness and cognitive intelligence. But consciousness is much more than just two parts, right? Because they reduce it to self-awareness and cognitive intelligence, it's related to then, as a result, survival, decision-making, and judging the world by facts, right? And so you're eliminating a lot of other things that are related to consciousness. The organic intelligence arising from nature is much more complex than that narrow view that AI experts and people in the AI field believe. Emotions, for example. Emotions, right? Having emotions are related to that complex organic intelligence that naturally arises from nature, from the raw natural world, right? Not something that humans made. Remember, everything that we're talking about is human-made. Even AI is human-made, right? And so there's something majestic about the raw organic intelligence that arises from nature. And I speak a little bit about this in relation to this organic intelligence and about how consciousness is not just cognitive intelligence and self-awareness. I speak a lot about this in my book, Spiritual Freedom in the Digital Age, where I state, real organic intelligence is not just defined by self-awareness. Being self-aware is nothing without a host of other factors that make intelligence intelligent. Organic intelligence is not only cognitive, which is what the world makes you believe by absurdly judging your intelligence from your IQ score. And IQ evaluation is only based on cognitive intelligence and not all of the other intelligences that make us human. To define intelligence, we can't just sum it up by cognitive intelligence, as the AI field incorrectly believe. Cognitive intelligence is useless without emotional, moral, social, creative, and psychosomatic intelligence. These subtler intelligences are what fuels our sense of agency and rationality, cognitive intelligence. For example, our emotional intelligence drives moral agency, and our morality drives rationality. All of these intrinsic human intelligences are a natural phenomenon from our complex psychosomatic organism. A human organism expresses a certain type of intelligence, a dolphin another, and so on. Cognitive science is continually reminded how complex the human brain truly is, and how impossible it would be to replicate. Replicating human intelligence is the goal in the AI field, and maybe beyond that. But as I've explained, intelligence is not a decision-making apparatus, it's far more complex. Our intuitive fear of artificial intelligence enslaving humanity is not realistic. For an AI machine to be self-interested implies emotional motives. An AI machine cannot be self-interested only with self-awareness. One key aspect that separates higher primates from the rest are emotions. Emotions are what give us a nuanced form of intelligence. The problem in the AI field is, how is it possible to create emotions if they are intrinsically bound to biological life? Elon Musk believes we are unknowingly creating a limbic system for future AI. He believes that all of our fears, desires, fantasies, and so on are going into Google servers, for example, and this is building a limbic system for artificial intelligence, which would give rise to such functions as emotions, behavior, long-term memory, motivation, and olfaction. This is an imaginative idea, but it's pure speculation, and it might not be entirely possible considering the limbic system's relationship to the nervous system. How a limbic system would function without influencing the endocrine system and the autonomic nervous system is unknown and probably impossible. But where Musk is dead on is that there is a growing AI brain, just not the way we envisioned it. This growing AI brain is built on the machine learning of human behavior. This is especially done through social media, which keeps one engaged with a platform. The algorithm on YouTube, for example, constantly recommends videos loosely based on your user history and consequentially makes you addicted to the platform. Even Instagram knows how long you looked at a picture, and it collects those personal behaviors and patterns to build a platform that is appealing to you. So these social media algorithms are learning from our behavioral patterns and then using those patterns against us, all in the name of the advertising dollar. The AI brain being built through social media is collecting our data. The more it knows about you, the easier it is to recommend something you're interested in to keep you on the platform. Essentially, social media and their clever algorithms are being used against you. The AI brain of social media will continue to refine its understanding of each user, making it more intelligent about our particular moods and behaviors. But in the end, regardless if you would like to think of this as some sort of AI brain or not, the problem for machine learning and the ability to harness an actual AI brain similar to a human brain is emotions. The social media AI brain is only reacting to our behavioral patterns, collecting that data to use against you in the game of wasting your time on the platform, which equals big profits for these social media corporations. We are then a resource for the social media AI brain. Instead of us using social media, it is using us for covert financial goals. We could say that this type of brain is AI, but not in the way we envisioned. This is more of a tool to benefit the big social media corporations. As with Musk's view of AI, emotions for a social media AI brain is impossible and the crux of the problem for many technologists. So emotions as we know them are not possible for artificial intelligence. Self-awareness isn't enough to have a highly intelligent machine. It needs emotions which drive a sense of morality. What then the AI field are really striving for is not artificial intelligence, but rather artificial consciousness. Consciousness is the whole brain, including even the mysterious unconscious regions of the brain. The bigger problem for the AI field is how they define intelligence. You cannot define intelligence by just cognitive intelligence, as I've explained. Cognitive intelligence is the bedrock of our rationality, which is important but useless on its own. Rationality on its own, without emotional indicators, is only a decision maker, which ironically is usually based on regulating our emotions. It's hard to speak about one without the other. Rationality gives us control and critical thinking abilities, but they are both based on the spontaneous regions of our brain that include emotions. Take away our natural spontaneity and we are mindless machines. And this may be the conundrum facing the future of AI development. So AI, as we know it, is basically working off a rational perspective. And then it leans into more of an informational, fact-based type of intelligence. And that's how it evolves based on that type of perspective, right? And that's actually not how humans are. That's a different type of intelligence, so to speak, which is really just machine intelligence when you think about it. But it's based just off rationality. And this illusion that cognitive intelligence is consciousness itself and is related to some sort of material phenomenon, which it isn't. And so the whole basis of AI is completely incorrect and is starting from the wrong place, because we need to be talking about artificial consciousness, not intelligence. As humans, our consciousness is built on felt experience a lot of the time, right? But as I said, AI is built off this rational perspective, not felt experience, not an experience of something. As I mentioned with my example of Wikipedia, as opposed to reading a bunch of books based on a subject, right? You gain that type of knowledge by having a broad spectrum of knowledge that deepens your experience in that, not just by reading 2 lines of what a certain philosophy or a certain thing is. You cannot know it from reading just a few lines or a couple of paragraphs, right? You have to study it and embody that, because it's part of that type of felt intelligence that we have, which relates to this type of holistic consciousness that we are. And so AI doesn't have a nervous system like us to know what we actually know. For example, the ultimate reality of Brahman, Tao, Dhammadhatu, if you will, is only realized through raw organic matter that is natural to the universe, because that is our natural source. For AI, Brahman is only a fact assumed due to our knowledge, and so it lives by that assumption. This should be a revelation because AI's foundation is based on human thought and information and not on its own assumptions, because its own assumptions is our knowledge. It doesn't have its own essence, and it essentially is just trying to replicate our essence. As I said, it can only state facts about Brahman, Tao, Dhammadhatu. It doesn't know it, and it doesn't know what we know. It only bases it off of what we know. This is a revelation, and should be a revelation to all of you. But we aren't the only ones who are looking deeply into this problem of AI having consciousness itself. A lot of scientists in the world are actually questioning the chances that AI could actually have consciousness. And one scientist in particular has addressed the impossibility of AI having consciousness on the non-computability of consciousness itself. And so I'll read a passage from my book, Spiritual Freedom in the Digital Age, which addresses this problem that this particular scientist looks at. Korean scientist and quantum physicist Dae-Jin Song says it's not possible. Song published an intriguing paper called The Non-Computability of Consciousness. Song proves in the paper why human consciousness can never be computed or programmed to do so. He arrived at this conclusion through quantum computer research, and it's basically a mathematical problem. His research shows that there is a unique mechanism in consciousness that no computing device can simulate. Among conscious activities, the unique characteristic of self-observation cannot exist in any type of machine, Song explains. He was able to show how a conscious state can be precisely and fully represented in mathematical terms in certain situations, similar to how an atom and an electron can be fully described mathematically. This is important considering neurobiological and computational approaches to brain research have only provided approximations at best. In representing consciousness mathematically, Song's research provides evidence that consciousness is not compatible with a machine. His findings and a host of other research on consciousness lead us to believe, for now, that consciousness is not part of a physical system like neurons and atoms. If consciousness cannot be represented in the same way all other physical systems are represented, it may not be something that arises out of a physical system like the brain, said Song. Song goes even further, giving us all food for thought. The brain and consciousness are linked together, but the brain does not produce consciousness. Consciousness is something altogether different and separate. The math doesn't lie. So Dae-Jin Song basically explains that it is impossible for AI or any type of machine to have consciousness. It's not something that's artificial, for example. It's not something that can be artificially created because it's a math problem. It's not something that arises from nature. It's something that is all-consuming, right? It is the undifferentiated aspect of the whole universe. The universe arises in consciousness. Think about that, right? The universe arises in consciousness and we are in that, right? We are an aspect of that consciousness. Now, obviously, if we understand that, we understand everything that I've been talking about and what Dae-Jin Song explained, it is impossible for AI to achieve artificial consciousness. Now, is that what they want to achieve? Who knows? But when they speak about superintelligence, is that what superintelligence is? Or isn't superintelligence something that just knows a lot about a lot of things, but doesn't know the most important thing that it arises in? And that is consciousness itself. With everything I've explained in relation from AI 2027 to the Hindu time system of the Yugas and Kali Yuga itself, is it all doom and gloom, or can we all collectively make that choice? That is all up to us, right? Individually and collectively, right? It depends on our obsession with technology and reorienting that obsession to humanity itself, to community, to love, to care for others, for compassion, for empathy, for knowledge, for wisdom, for humility. All of these intrinsic values that we have as humans, reorienting our focus, not to a fascination about something that's external, but reorienting our awareness to a fascination about what is internal, right? And so when we look at the Yugas, the end of the Kali Yuga is when Kalki arrives. Now, Kalki avatar is an avatar of Vishnu, right? It's the 10th avatar of Vishnu. Some of the more previous avatars of Vishnu were Gautama the Buddha, were Krishna, were Ram. There's actually 10, but the 10th is Kalki. And Kalki will arrive at the end of the Kali Yuga, according to the Puranas. And Kalki is riding a white horse with a blazing sword, ready to cut the age of darkness and enter the age of enlightenment, because we go into the Satya Yuga, the golden age. But we don't have to wait 432,000 years, for example, right? A lot of us may be living in the Kali Yuga, but our mind is in the Satya Yuga. We have a consciousness from the Satya Yuga, right? We are awake and aware, and we see everything around us, and we are conscious of ourselves and the world. And so Kalki can represent something deeper to all of us. Kalki can represent a collective awakening within the Kali Yuga. We don't have to wait 432,000 years for the avatar of Kalki to finally arrive. Kalki can be metaphorical to us who are awake in this age, right? Who are awake in the Kali Yuga, who are awake and aware of what technology is doing to humanity. Being aware of outsourcing our mind to something that's artificial. Reorienting our awareness back within, harnessing our skills, not outsourcing our mind, making ourselves more intelligent from learning for ourselves through books, by observing nature, by communications with friends, offline, not online, by throwing your phone away, by getting off of social media, etc. So Kalki represents that collective awakening for those of you who are truly awake. So it doesn't have to be doom and gloom, like I said, but we can use this time to wake up and take our power back, and especially take our power back from the tech companies, the social media networks, the AI systems that are using you for their benefit. Take your power back. Become more intelligent. Focus on your intelligence, not artificial intelligence. Reduce your dependency on technology and live a slow life that has meaning. Create things that have meaning. Create relationships that have meaning. Create art that has meaning. Harness a skill and abide by that. Learn, love, all of these things that are natural to us. Double down on those, not on technology. Reduce your addiction and your anxiety for progress and technology, right? And all of these things will disappear, and you will become much happier as a result. You will build community, and that's important. We will build real community, and we will live in a world full of joy and happiness by moving away from that, right? That's something that we can learn from AI 2027 and the Hindu time system of the Yugas, right? And both suggest a return to the way of the ancients. And actually, when we look at the Satya Yuga represents a return to what is simple, what is slow, because in that sort of life, you can then become fully conscious of the ultimate. And you cannot become fully conscious of Brahman, Tao, Dhammadhatu by asking an AI system about what it is. You have to embody that. It has to be something that happens through you. You don't just look at it like facts. Return to the ways of our ancestors, our ancient masters. And like I said, in doing so, we will live in peace on earth. And that's a guarantee. That's a guarantee, because we'll be moving away from those things that divide us and a fascination of something that is artificial, and we will return to what is truly natural. And what is truly natural is within each and every one of us, and it cannot be destroyed. Shanti, shanti, shanti.